said, and without further delay, I would love to introduce to all of you Adriana Scali, who is a YSpace alumni from one of our programs. She is the founder and chief talent strategist of Link HR. Um, she is a certified human resource professional and a certified human resource leader with the HRPA. Her love for supporting small to mid-sized businesses with HR strategy and solutions has led her to create Link HR in 2015, where she provides fractional advisory and project-based HR services to small and mid-sized businesses that want to be an employer of choice. Prior to this, she has worked across the board with many organizations, large and small, supporting on their HR needs, spanning across 20 years of experience within various industries, including technology, healthcare, finance, retail, construction, manufacturing, warehouse, and distribution, social services, and the nonprofit sector. So I know that many of you come from diverse backgrounds, and Adriana is absolutely well-versed to help all of you with your HR questions. That all being said, I am going to stop talking and allow our expert here, Adriana, to take the mic.
Thank you for that introduction. And I just want to say, in addition to also being a YSpace alum, I also, when I started my business in 2015, the first place I visited was the Markham Small Business Center. So I did get a lot of information and tools and that from there when I first started my business. So yeah, just I'll give them a plug as well and say they will be helpful to you. Well, thank you everyone for joining me this evening. I'm just going to share my presentation here. So I'm sure you've all joined me this evening because you know the importance of HR. Oh, sorry, hold on a sec here. There we go. As you know, growing your business is no easy feat. There are so many things that you have to plan and execute, things like finance, marketing, etc. But none of these things will lead you to success if you don't have the right talent in place for your team. So as you know, when you hire the right people, your business will prosper. Poor hiring decisions, on the other hand, may cost your business a lot of money, a lot of time, and you may lose customers and just not reach the goals and the growth that you would like. So I can see there that Nafis has shared a poll. I just wanted to get an idea from this group as to how many of you have experience with leading a team, how many of you have experience with hiring. So if you can please complete that poll, that would be great for me to see. And also don't hesitate to enter in the chat. I would love to know who's joining this evening. If you want to enter in the chat your business or the business that you are working on starting up, I would love to hear about your entrepreneurial journey. So please feel free to share in the chat as well.
I'll just give everyone another 10 seconds to get their poll answers.
So it looks like here we have a majority of participants that have experience with managing a team. That's great. Can we go to the next question on the poll?
You all see the
Next,
poll? Sorry,
yes.
trying
So
to get
now
that
I
up.
see the next question is asking if you have experience with hiring. We're going to talk about general HR today for business, general HR best practices. And we're also going to spend time on the hiring process and what that looks like to ensure that you're hiring the right talent for your business. So it looks like here, yeah, we have a good majority that have experience with hiring, which is great. Okay, so I think we can close that poll now. Thanks to all of you for participating. So a little bit about Link HR, my company. We partner with a lot of small and mid-sized businesses in Markham and in the York Region area that want to grow their business and achieve their goals through effective HR strategy and practices. So as was mentioned before, we offer a number of different services, including fractional HR, recruitment, management training and coaching, emotional intelligence training and coaching, and then project-based HR like employee handbooks, diversity and inclusion programs, and that kind of thing. So happy to speak to you more about what we do if that's of interest for you as you grow your business. As I mentioned, we're going to cover sort of the HR strategy and HR essentials for small business. And then we're going to do a deeper dive into hiring best practices and onboarding. And of course, we'll leave time at the end for your questions. So if you don't mind, if you can type in the chat, what is an HR strategy? What does that mean to you? When you think about your business or the business you want to start, what does HR strategy mean? Any ideas? No, I'm not marking this, so. What do you think makes up an HR strategy, and why is an HR strategy so important for business?
I think an HR strategy has to do with everything from seeking job seekers, like finding job seekers, to how you bring them on board, how you onboard them, get them integrated into the company and trained up, and includes like while they're working, like payments and benefits, all that stuff. And then if you have to let them go, how to let them go, how to let them go with a cushion in a way that they have training and they can go into the job place, or if they need a record of employment, or they need like, you know, EI, or they need like even to be trained so that they know how to move on, you know. If they've been stuck in a role for a long time, they can be a little more adaptable, give them options to get more trained up, to be more market ready for as a worker.
Thank you for that. Yeah, you covered pretty much the whole employee life cycle, which is great. So starting from attracting the right talent to then hiring them, bringing them on board, and then essentially what their employee experience is going to be like with your organization. And if you don't put thought into that in advance, then what happens is, you know, that's where sometimes you get those workplace cultures that just happen because there wasn't any planning involved with how to create the desired workplace culture that you want. So it's important to think about that employee life cycle. as Tarek just described. And especially today, I mean, what have we learned from the pandemic? I think you've probably all heard about the Great Resignation, right? Or the Great Realignment, they called it, where there were a lot of employees that left jobs during the pandemic because they reevaluated their role and work-life balance, and looked at, am I truly fulfilled by my job? Do my values align with my company's values? Is this really the kind of work that I want to be doing? Is this really the kind of company that I want to work for? So it's really forced employers these days to think about and put time and effort and a focus on what their HR strategy is, because that's how you're going to attract and retain your talent for your business. So let's look at this. This is essentially going through that employee life cycle. These are sort of my tips and what I look at when I'm working with a client and developing their HR strategy. So first, we would always start with the business's goals and their values. If you haven't already, it's important that you define what your company's mission and values are. Okay. So for example, my company's values, Link HR's values, I would say the one value I place at the top of everything else for me is transparency. And so when I'm hiring people for my team, that's one of the values that I want to make sure there's alignment with. Okay, so I would incorporate questions in the interview process and that kind of thing around transparency and customer service. So I would always start with the business owner with that and writing down what their goals are for the present and the future. Where do you anticipate, or where do you want your business to be a year from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now? And now looking at what talent is required to reach those goals. So in a year from now, if you want your business to be launching a new product, for example, you likely need to bring in some talent to fulfill the tasks and activities required to launch that new product. So in doing that, you would determine what knowledge, skills, experience, and abilities are required for each role. And this is where it's important that you put some thought into a job description for each specific job for your team. Okay. And this does not have to be, a 2-3 page document. I think as long as you have an idea of the major tasks, the major duties and responsibilities involved, and you understand the workflow that will happen in your team, that's what's most important here. Then you will want to obviously make sure that you are creating a plan for how your business is going to attract the talent that you will need. And so that's where the employee experience begins, actually, right? An employee's experience with your company begins at the time of applying for a job with your company. So that job advertisement, or that, the employer branding that you have, the recruitment campaigns, that may be the first time someone is learning about your business. So how would you like to present your business? And what type of employee experience would you like to provide? Meaning, what do you want your employees to get out of working with you and your team and your company? What type of feelings do you want them to have? Is growth and advancement important for you? Is that what you want to provide to your team? Is the opportunity to grow and advance in their careers? So things like that are important to think about in advance, well in advance of hiring anybody, so that you can plan for these things in your HR strategy. Once you've hired the right talent for your business, then you will need to consider, how are you going to continue to develop your team's skills and abilities? How are you going to motivate your team? How are you going to manage performance? And how will you incentivize for the desired performance and outcomes you would like to see? So here you're going to be thinking more about how will you provide training? How are you going to offer certain pay, bonuses, maybe rewards? How are you going to recognize for the performance that you want to see? These are all very important aspects of your HR strategy. And like I said, whether you're starting with 1 employee or 10, this is so important to set well in advance so that you are in the driver's seat of the workplace culture that you are creating. Also, part of retaining your team is consider, the work and making the work. How are you going to make the work meaningful for the team? We're going to get into that a little bit more in a few slides. The pay, benefits, recognition, career development, growth and advancement, and also connection and community. I think I think that became very important during the pandemic as well, right? I think we realized, I think a lot of people got tired of working remotely and on their own, right? We're for a lot of us, we like to feel connected, and part of feeling connected and belonging at work, where we spend 8 hours a day or 9 hours a day, it's important to grow that sense of community and have that sense of belonging for your employees. So overall, you're going to hear me talk about this term, employee experience. That is essentially the employee life cycle and the experience that you would like your employees to have at your company. And it's really the values that drive your employee experience and the type of employer, the type of boss, let's say, if you will, the type of boss that you want to be. And you probably have all had your own experiences with good bosses and bad bosses. And so that will obviously inform your decisions and what kind of boss and what kind of things you want to provide to your team. I think I'll just stop here for a second to see if there are any questions at this point. Feel free to type in the chat or unmute.
I just got a question just in terms of systemizing all this so that it's like copy paste every time someone joins a company. Do you recommend any kind of templates or set of documents that could help systemize it so that I know you can create your own documents and have a system on your own, but do you recommend something that you like, hey, okay, this is like the gold standard of systemizing, intake of new employees, recruitments, and in that sense of operations for the HR strategy?
Yes, definitely. I definitely recommend at least having an onboarding program or an onboarding system. I think this is what your question is, but tell me if I'm going off on the wrong path. I think you can have an onboarding program developed that's going to cover things like teaching, informing your employees about your company, about your values, and how all these things that we just talked about here on this slide, like how they're going to be incentivized, what type of career training they will receive, and what is that going to look like, what kind of benefits. You can definitely create an onboarding program that includes all of these things, and you would use that onboarding program for all of your new hires. So it does make sense to create your own program or create your own system for doing this. And I'm hoping that these slides, I know they will be shared with you after today. I'm hoping that these will help you to create your own template. That's kind of what I had in my mind. I'm also a template person myself. And so as I created this, I was trying to put it in columns, if you will, so that it could guide you in creating your own HR strategy. And then from there, you would create separate programs for onboarding, optimizing performance, etc. I hope that helps. Does that help?
Yeah, yes, thank you.
Okay.
And is there any kind of existing templates out there? I have our own, but I'm just wondering, it can always be better. If there's anything you can recommend that's out there that you say, okay, this is like a gold standard to shoot for.
I don't have anything like that to recommend. We customize everything for our clients. So even myself, I probably don't use like a standard template. I just make sure that I cover all of these things when I'm developing a strategy. I do have an onboarding guide. I'm happy to share that. You can email me after today. I'm happy to share with you an onboarding guide that will help to guide you in how to create an onboarding program. So I guess it is kind of like a template for an onboarding program that I can definitely share with you and with anyone who's interested.
Okay, thank you.
So when I was working with Y-Space on what to cover, on what type of content to cover, we talked about the HR must-haves. Like, what are the things that a business owner must take care of when they need to hire? So when you're moving from a solopreneur to needing a team, and there's, oh, the numbering is wrong there. number one. But yeah, so I just came up with a short list of what I feel are the essentials. So one being an employment agreement, or if you're using independent contractors, it's important that you use a proper independent contractor agreement for those independent contractors. I should state that it's important also to know the difference between the two, right? So making sure that, if it is an independent contractor, it's a true independent contractor and not someone who's really an employee, but, wants to be treated like an independent contractor for tax reasons and that kind of thing. So this, I feel like, is a must-have. It is going to set you up for success. I recommend working with an employment lawyer to get a properly drafted employment agreement or independent contractor agreement that will protect your business. And some of the things that you will want included in an employment agreement, for example, is obviously to be compliant with employment legislation, but also to reduce liability on your side, and to protect your business's intellectual property, for example, or customers and that kind of thing. So you'll see a lot of employment agreements will include some type of non-disclosure agreement, some type of non-solicitation, some type of intellectual property agreement. And it's important to get the proper legal advice on this. And invest the money, do it once, get a template, if you will, from the employment lawyer, and then you can just customize it for each offer. Typically, it depends on the roles you're hiring for, but I would suspect most of the time you're going to include all of these, something like a non-disclosure might be included for everybody. There might be a specific role that needs something very specific, and then like an employment lawyer could help you with that as well. Of course, you also want to make sure that you're paying at least minimum wage and you're providing the minimum entitlements according to the provincial employment standards of your jurisdiction. So making sure that you're providing the correct number of vacation, like the correct number of vacation days, sick days, those kinds of things. So make sure that you have all of that covered. And also there are policies and practices required to be compliant with employment legislation. I would also, beyond sort of legislative compliance, we talked before about a value system. And I will keep going back to this throughout the presentation because it really is your guiding light as you hire employees. You want to make sure that you're not just hiring for their skill, you're hiring for their attitude, but you're also hiring for alignment of values. Your value system will also inform your code of conduct. So what is like sort of the acceptable behaviors and dress code, and even how you present in virtual meetings, for example, things like that you want to think about in advance and be the driver of the workplace culture that you desire to have. And then the other thing also is job descriptions. And I know I touched upon this before as well. So it is important to have job descriptions. Job descriptions help you as the employer to organize duties and responsibilities and workflow. But also when you give it to to a candidate or to a new employee, you are telling them this is what is expected of you. These are the things that, this is how your performance will be measured. This is how we are going to reward you. It's going to be based on, mostly on the job description. So the job descriptions are very important to have for the roles within your team. Sometimes we work with clients and they say, Adriana, let's not waste time on writing a job description. And then I go into my education and I have to convince them why it's important. And then by the end, I get their buy-in. But if you've ever, I just ask this, I don't know if any of you have ever had the experience of starting a new job and not being given onboarding, not being given a job description. You're hired, you know your job title, you know what you're going to get paid maybe, and you show up on your first day and you don't know what to expect. If you've had that experience, let me know, type it in the chat. I'd like to know how that made you feel. I like this comic strip because it's, anyway, it's just a funny one. I think sometimes about, if I were an animal, what would I be? But I like this one. I was fooled by the job description. Anyone have any experience with that? Well, I hope you haven't. I hope you've had good onboarding experiences, but definitely giving a job description and proper onboarding to your new employees is going to increase the percentage of retaining them in the long term by a long shot. I don't remember the percentage that's in the research, but research shows that the onboarding experience of a new employee will dictate how long they stay with your company. So you could hire the best person for the job, but if their employee experience with your company starts off on the wrong foot, they're not given a thorough onboarding, they're not set up for success, and there's not clarity for them on what's expected, chances are they're going to start looking for another job. So for me, I'm really big on being clear and transparent and letting employees know what is expected of them, and also what you are promising them as well, because it should be a mutually beneficial relationship. So this just talks about what to include in a job description and why it's important. The other reason why job descriptions are also important is when you start to hire, especially for more than one job in your company, and you need to essentially create a compensation system as well. So a lot of HR specialists like myself will use different methods, but one popular one is called point factor evaluation, to evaluate the different jobs in your organization And then we also look at market data to see what the competitive compensation is in the market. So because you want to make sure that you are paying your team and the way you're paying them is internally equitable within your company and also is competitive with the external market. And so job descriptions, when you're looking at market data, you don't want to use just job titles. You want to make sure that you are looking at the actual duties and responsibilities of the job and the qualifications to be able to benchmark against other similar or same jobs out in the market. Because job titles, from one company to another, a job title could mean something very different in company A than it is. It could be a completely different set of duties and responsibilities in company B with the exact same job title. Okay, so now we're going to go into more about hiring. And like I mentioned before, really the pandemic has brought to the surface the importance of alignment between employer and employee in regards to, what the employer is providing and what the employee needs and desires for well-being, for meaningful work, etc. So it's definitely a candidate's market these days. And they're looking for a lot of different things, right? Employees are looking for financial security, so they're looking for what you're offering in terms of pay and benefits, and maybe the longevity of employment with your company. They're also looking for development and advancement opportunities. They're looking for work-life balance. Some of them might want a fully remote job. Some might want hybrid. Some might want all in person. And in any of these situations, it's also important to to look at social well-being, connection, and a feeling of belonging. So those are all important things that candidates are looking for. And I think you've probably heard, in the last several months, it's been hard. Employers have had a difficult time hiring because there are a lot of jobs out there. And candidates can choose, which is a good thing for candidates. It makes employers step up their game and really think about things. So what I would like you to do now is you will be placed in breakout rooms shortly, and I will leave this slide up so you can see what I would like you to discuss. But in breakout rooms, I would like you to share with the others what challenges you've experienced with hiring. I know most of you from the poll have had experience with hiring, but if you haven't, it's okay. Just think about what challenges you think you may have when you do need to hire, and then think about what are some hiring challenges that may be unique to small businesses. So maybe you have experience with this. Maybe you've already hired for your own business. If you haven't, it's okay. Just think about what do you think are some challenges that a small business would face that a larger business like a Tim Hortons, for example, wouldn't face. So as a group, just come up with some of those challenges and brainstorm ideas on how to overcome those challenges. And then after a few minutes, you'll be brought back to the larger group. And I would love for a few groups, if you can select a presenter, someone that's willing to unmute and present your group's ideas to the larger group. I will be looking for at least 2 or 3 to do that. So yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing your ideas.
You're just opening up all the rooms, so when it pops up, just click join on your screen. So just make sure you're clicking join when it pops up on your screen. For those of you still here, let me know if you're having trouble joining the groups or not. But you should have had a window pop up and then you just have to click join. Adriana, should we say 6:55 when we close it?
Yeah, what time do you have now?
6:51 right now.
Yeah, maybe, yes, that'd be good. Thank you.
Okay. Anthony, Louise, Eddie, Don, let me know if you guys are having trouble. I know a couple of you are still here. You should be in a breakout room, so let me know if you're having trouble. No worries, Sheena. I know you're driving.
I missed a couple of these comments when they came in.
Oh, no worries. We always go back to them at the end.
Yeah. Thank you.
No worries. Okay, closing up the group now. A couple groups are still finishing up their thoughts, I think. They will be back in 10 seconds.
That's good. I'm glad. I hope there was some good discussion.
Okay, everyone should be back.
All right, welcome back, everyone. So I hope you had some good discussions with your group. Do I have a volunteer to present on what your group discussed as challenges and some ideas on overcoming those challenges? Feel free to unmute yourself.
Hi, okay, this is Talina, and in my group I had Ying and Faith. And so we didn't really talk about the challenges to overcome, but we talked about the challenges, and time went by so quickly. So in terms of challenges, we discussed potential employees not having the skill sets involved that's needed. Also having an international component, whereby in different countries, there's different standards of practice in regards to hiring. We talked about, and even people, potential employees not even showing up to the interview. So you have a day of like interviews, and maybe of the day you have 10 candidates and maybe 2 or 3 like show up, and the 2 and 3 that show up are not even the ones that you would pick as an organization. So that's also been very challenging. We also talked about the generational aspect. So for Gen Z, their kind of mode in regards to looking for jobs is very different than millennials, very different from Gen X, et cetera. So there's also the generational component that's been problematic as well that we discussed. And I think that that was the majority of what we discussed. However, Faith and Ying, please feel free to jump in if you'd like.
Yes, I think you covered the most important areas in reference to what we discussed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
The time went by
Talina.
so quickly.
Oh, well, that's good for me to know. Good feedback. I'm glad you had that. That's like such a fruitful discussion in your group. And you talked about a lot of very real challenges, right? Like you talked about sometimes, needing to hire someone that maybe doesn't have the desired skill set that you would like. So sometimes you need to hire for potential, right? And the ability to learn those skill sets. And then that training that you need to provide as a company becomes so important. You talked about the different standards based on the location. And this became very important during the pandemic, because as people started to work remotely, companies are now hiring remote workers all across the country, in the US, like everywhere. And yes, you need to be aware of, going back to compliance, you need to be aware of what are the employment standards, the labor standards, the health and safety requirements, the pay equity requirements that you need to comply with. So yeah, very, 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 a very real challenge these days. And I'm going to call it the ghosting. So you talked
Oh,
about
yes.
you've taken time, you've screened applications, you may have even done a preliminary video interview or phone call or what have you. You set up a day, you're set, you're ready to go, you're excited, and then you get ghosted.
Yes.
And so this is very real. And there's not a lot you can do. There's not a lot you can do to prevent that. I think it's, I think moving quickly. So in the market today, like I talked about, it is a candidates market. And we are finding, my team especially, like, and the clients that we're working with, and just generally, like we're connected to other HR professionals. If you don't move through your hiring process in a, I'm not encouraging to hire fast. The saying, hire slow, fire fast, right? You
Yeah.
don't want to rush your hiring process. That's not at all what I would like you to do, or not at all what I advise. But you do want to make sure that you are keeping in regular contact with your candidates, especially those candidates that you're interested in. So if you do a preliminary kind of conversation with them, don't wait too long. If it's someone that you think, this could be a good candidate for this role, I need to I need to continue on in the interview process. Don't wait too long to set up that next interview or set up that technical assessment or whatever it is that's part of your interview process. Keep them engaged. And I usually send out a reminder. I know you probably shouldn't have to send out a reminder for an interview, right? But sometimes I do. It really depends on the demographic and that kind of thing. And just, I try to set up candidates for success and set up employers for success. So sometimes I send out those little reminders, but definitely something that's happening. And like I said, there's not much that you can do to avoid the ghosting. Other than, getting someone really excited to come to your interview and keeping the lines of communication open, keeping them engaged, letting them know that you're interested, and, hey, we're just going through this process, and next week we want to invite you in, or, whatever the case may be. And yes, different generations, we do have our preferred communication methods. And so in the next few slides, we're going to talk about your advertising process, your talent like attracting and acquiring talent, and looking at where to advertise, where to, how to communicate your job opening, because the more sources you can use, the bigger the pool of candidates that you're going to reach. Right? Because we know that some are going to be more on social media and looking at job advertisements or announcements about job openings on social media, whereas others will be more on job boards like Indeed, for example. So the more that you can diversify your sourcing strategy, the greater the pool of candidates that you are going to attract.
Thank you.
So, I mean, is there anyone else before I jump in here further? And thank you, Talina, for that. Is there any other group that would like to share what they've discussed?
From my group, I had me and Lee. One of the challenge that I like really put in the forefront is when you're a small business, let's say not having kind of like attractive benefit to attract employees, the right fits that they will come. You might be a startup, you may not have buying as a company.
Sarah, I'm sorry, I don't know if it was just on my end. I couldn't hear you well. It was breaking up a lot. Do you mind putting it in the chat? I think I heard benefits, but I don't. Yeah, do you mind? It was breaking up, or if you want to try again.
Okay. We were trying to say as a startup, let's say a new business, we have tried to be older.
Sorry, sir, I'm gonna jump in. You are breaking up, so maybe try putting it in the chat.
Just give Sarah a little while here.
If anyone else wants to go while Sarah puts in the
Yeah.
chat, feel free.
Does anyone else want to share what was discussed in their group? Okay, I'm going to look out for your message in the chat, Sarah. I'm going to just continue on for sake of time, as I still have quite a bit that I would like to go through. So I'm going to continue on to the next slide, but I'm going to look out for your message, Sarah, because I think I know what you're trying to get at. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think I know. I think you were saying something about benefits, maybe not being able to offer the same benefits as larger businesses. I'm going to guess that that's what it is, but if you could put it in the chat, that would be great. Okay, yes. So yes. Okay, how do we offer? So Sarah's comment, how do we offer attractive benefits as a startup compared to a company that is older? And benefits, you know, is one of those terms. There's a lot of things that we can that employees consider to be a benefit. I know traditionally we think about health benefits, right? Health and dental and vision and that kind of thing. And that is a challenge of small businesses, right? With the type of budgets that you have, you know, obviously your pockets aren't as deep. So then, you know, you may be looking at other benefits that you can provide to your employees that are of value to them. That, you know, are not going to be the same health and dental benefits that a large company may be able to provide, but it may be something like providing more flexibility, providing flexible scheduling. It might be reimbursing for certain courses, something like that. So, you know, you want to look at your ideal candidate persona and determine what they would value and provide that to them. It may be like, you know, a lot of small business I see offering more time off. They feel like that is a competitive advantage to them. It could be different internal learning opportunities as well. And the job itself, right? The job itself in a small business, usually jobs in small businesses Employees are exposed to more and they get to wear multiple hats, and it provides a really great and broader career and learning experience. So that's a benefit, and it's all in how you as the employer communicates that as part of your employer branding, to highlight those things that you can provide. And if someone, for someone, it may be very important for them to have a flexible schedule where they can start and end at slightly different times, or take a Friday afternoon off or something like that. That may be more beneficial for some than health benefits. So definitely there are those things. There are challenges unique to small businesses, sometimes and a lot of times due to financial reasons. The other thing I want to mention is, I don't know if it came up in any of the groups, was company reputation. So if you're just starting your company's new, and you put a job ad out there, right? The job seekers are a lot of times are attracted to the company names that they know, right? It's the familiar. As humans, we like the familiar. So we know, oh yes, I know, I heard that that's a good company. So these bigger companies that have been around for a while, and they have an employer branding strategy, and they're getting out to their candidate market on a regular basis, may likely have a leg up to smaller companies that are just forming. That's why it's so important for small businesses to tell their story, tell why you started your company. What is your mission? What are your values? What are your goals? You want to hire people that want to grow with you. That's what you can offer. That's unique. Bigger companies, yes, they likely grow and pivot too, but not to the same, not at the same pace, not at the same level, right? So it's so important that you tell your story, and telling your story is going to attract the right people, because someone will say, wow, I admire that person. I can see why they started that business. I want to be a part of that. And that's how you can advertise yourself and attract the right talent for your business. Okay, I'm seeing a question here. I'll just look at now. What differences would you want to see in an employment contract when hiring temp, co-op, intern, contract, freelance part? Yeah, so the employment agreement, you would have to customize your employment agreement based on the type of employment. Obviously your employment contract or employment agreement, I use those interchangeably, should state, if it's a part-time role, if it's a full-time role, what the hours are, that kind of thing, because again, you want to make sure that the expectations are clear. There's no misunderstanding, especially for a contract, for example. If it's a contract role, it's not a permanent role. You want to make sure that that's also communicated in the interview process, and included in an employment agreement for sure. So you're going out now, you're at the stage, you know what kind of jobs you need to recruit for. And the next very important step before you even put out a job ad or start communicating your job vacancy is thinking about what your ideal candidate, about the ideal candidate persona. And this is going to help you to determine where you're going to post the role, where you're going to advertise the vacancy, so that you can reach that ideal candidate persona. Also, you want to create your employee value proposition, your EVP. This is so important. It's always been important, but especially today, it's important. And we're going to talk about an EVP in more detail. Then, based on the ideal candidate persona, like I said, you would select advertising channels to reach those types of job seekers. But typically companies will post on their website, on their social media channels, on different job boards, Indeed, LinkedIn, those kinds of things. You may post with universities and colleges, with professional associations, etc. And then you want to create an attractive job advertisement for the different channels, right? You want to create the social media post about your job vacancy is going to look very different than what you're going to put on Indeed, for example. So you are going to use that job description that you wrote up when you defined what the role looks like. And that job description, along with your mission and values and your ideal candidate persona, you're going to write an attractive job advertisement or job posting. But first, let's start with diving in more into the employee value proposition. Anyone know what this means? What is an employee value proposition? You can unmute or type in the chat. No? Okay. So this essentially is how, your business needs to differentiate itself from your competitors. You also need to think the same way about employees. So how do you differentiate your company as an employer from other employers in your industry and location? So essentially, your employee value proposition is a promise or a pledge that you make to your future and or current employees. So it's a promise of what you will provide to them in terms of the experience they will have at your company, the benefits they will receive, pay, et cetera, in exchange for bringing their skills and their talent and their energy and their efforts to your company. And your employee value proposition is going to be a vital part of your employer branding strategy. So wherever you post your open roles, you want to make sure that you include what your employee value proposition is. Many things can make up an employee value proposition. I'm including here on this slide some things that you can consider. You will in no way, look at all 5 of these categories. I mean, you can, of course, but usually I advise my clients to choose 3. What are 3 things that you really want to focus on? These are the things that you promise to your future employees or current employees that if you work for my company, these and you bring your skills and talent and effort and energy to my company, these are the things I'm going to provide to you. And so it could be that you want to be very, very competitive with compensation, for example. Or it could be that you want to be very competitive with benefits. And when I say benefits here, you'll see things like other than health benefits, there's other things like time off benefits, flexibility, and that kind of thing, which is more doable for smaller employers. The other thing you can look at is career development. How are you going to offer opportunities for your employees to continue to grow and develop their skill set? Maybe you want to look at having professional training. Maybe you want to look at tuition support, that kind of thing. The other thing you want to consider is connection. So maybe part of your employee value proposition is the diversity strategy that you have and all the things that you do to make sure that you welcome a diverse workforce and there's a feeling of belonging within your team. And there's strong, solid, close relationships with your team, with the leaders, with you as a business owner, and with the other leaders of your company. So that's very important as well. A lot of people look for that. They want to have a good relationship with the management team. They want to have that connection and that feeling. Everyone wants a feeling of belonging. The other thing is meaning, providing meaningful work. And maybe your company, has is invested in social responsibility initiatives. So, even something like that could be part of the employee value proposition from your company. So typically you want to pick, something like 2 to 3, and this should be aligned with your company's values and the employee experience you want to provide. So what is really important for your company based on your company's values? And these are the people that you want to, through these rewards and benefits and compensation, you're going to attract the right talent and retain them. I don't know. I mean, I was thinking about some examples of this to share with you today. And, I couldn't help but think about the current Tim Hortons commercial that's on TV right now. And I know Tim Hortons is a big company, but there's a commercial right now, and it's a recruitment campaign. It's a commercial for recruiting team members to work at Tim Hortons locations. And if you know the commercial that I'm talking about, drop it in the chat if you know what I'm talking about. But it's a team member, it's an employee at a location, and it's almost like she's taking you sort of like through her experience and working at Tim Hortons, and she's showing herself with her team. And it talks about one thing that I remember seeing is hockey card trading night. They have a hockey card trading night. And so that commercial is actually showcasing their employee value proposition, which is, I think the commercial talks about flexibility. I think the commercial talks about working in a team. And then they talked about this hockey trading night and something else I can't remember right now, which makes me think, oh, wow, they promote connection. They promote a feeling of belonging. They promote, the social aspect of working in a team. So that's just one example. But if you just Google search company employee value propositions, you will see examples of what other companies do as well. And it may give you some ideas on how to create your company's employee value proposition. So about the job posting or job advertisement itself, if you are going to post through colleges, universities, various job boards, you're going to have an attractive and well-written job posting. So typically the traditional job postings, for many years looked like this: job title, introduction to the company, job summary, the responsibilities, qualifications required, and then the application instructions, provide a cover letter, et cetera, et cetera. This is passé. We don't want to do this anymore, okay? Well, this is my advice to you. This is boring. You want to step it up, and you want to tell your story, like I mentioned before, because you all started your businesses for a certain reason. There's a story behind why you started your business. And so you want to make sure that you're communicating your purpose, your why, and to have people that believe in your why and want to join you in the why to become a part of your team. So job postings today, this is just an example of what I would recommend, is when you're writing your job posting or job advertisement, you want to have an exciting introduction. It may be something like, why would the candidate want to work for you and want to work in this job specifically? You are going to highlight your employee value proposition. So those 2 or 3 things that you're going to promise them. It could be flexible work schedule. It could be volunteering days. It could be some other type of program that you can offer them. You may include, if you have current employees, you may want to include a testimonial from a current employee. You also want to talk about the impact of their job. What is the impact of their role, whether it be to your business, to your clients and customers, to society, depends on what type of business you're in. Or you can reframe that into describing like a day in the life of. So a day in the life of, whatever the role is. You want to describe, of course, the qualifications required for the job, but to make it personal, use you, right? Describe like your ideal candidate, like you're talking to the person, like you have a diploma in this, and when you use you, it's more personal and it speaks to job seekers. And then anything that you can insert into the job posting about your company story, about any visuals, like if you have photos of your workplace, photos of your current team, photos of you and your leadership team, any videos. I know you can't make a video, a commercial like Tim Hortons did, probably not. But you can always shoot a small video yourself, or you can take pictures yourself and post those on social media to show how your team works together. So you want to make your job postings as attractive as possible, and that'll help to bring in some applications. Of course, it goes without saying, I don't have it here, but of course you want to make sure that your job postings comply with all legislation, including human rights and accessibility legislation. So a lot of business owners will ask me where to attract applicants. Other than a lot will post on Indeed, for example, but where else? Where else can you search for? Where else can you reach job seekers? Again, it goes back to what you think the ideal candidate persona is for that specific job. It depends on the job. I will advise my client on at least 3 different sources or channels. Okay, you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. So try to think of 3 different sources or job boards, etc., to reach the job seekers that you would like to reach. But there's a lot of different resources out there to recruit from diverse communities. You can use social media channels, obviously different job boards. You can reach out to universities and colleges. They usually don't charge for you to post for their alumni. If you'd like to hire students, co-op students, and that's a great funnel for future employment. So if you have, for example, seasonal work, that's a great pool of candidates to tap into as well. But also if you're, just kind of starting your business and you don't know if the role that you've defined is exactly going to stay that way, but you want to try it out, you want to try out an employee, hire a student on a co-op work term. And then if it works out, they could be a future employee of yours. So it provides it's a good funnel for future hires. There's youth summer programs, there's government funding for those. There's newcomer employment programs, the various employment help agencies that you can reach out to that will also post the job for you and help you with the screening and interview process. There's different, industry type job fairs. There's professional associations you can go to. And then of course, don't forget to ask your network, and you can have, if you have employees already, you can create an internal employee referral program. And who best to be a brand ambassador for you than your current employees? So, make sure that you share with your network, and that you kind of are always on the lookout for talent. I think that's important. I'm not suggesting to have job postings up, 12 months of the year. But, be open to just constantly networking and, let's say going to job fairs and that kind of thing, because you're trying to build your employer brand, and you're trying to inform your, potential future hires, for example, what your company's all about. You want to get your name out there. You want to build your reputation. We often get asked as well about inclusive hiring practices, and I could spend a whole day on this. But I just put down on this slide sort of the main, I think for me, what would be the main considerations. So one is, if you are going to make a commitment to diversity and inclusivity on your team, you want to make sure that you state that's going to be that's part of your company, that's part of your brand, it's part of your values. You want to make sure that you state that commitment. And you want to write inclusive job postings. I'm going to go into that in a little bit more detail next. Also make sure that if you do have a website and you have a career page, that it's accessible to all candidates. A lot of web designers will know that they have to follow the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, WCAG. There's a lot of things, a lot of standards to make your website accessible, things like closed captioning and alternative text for images and that kind of thing. You also want to look at where to advertise to reach diverse communities. So I have a couple of links there for you. When you get these slides, feel free to look at those. There's one great list from actually McMaster University. There are a couple that they've listed there that are specific to the Hamilton area, but also there's others there that are either on Ontario-wide or Canada-wide. And there's also on the government job bank website, there's also resources for diversity and inclusive hiring practices as well. So I put those two links there for you. Ensure that you establish diverse interview panels, but also make sure that you use a standardized job interview process for all candidates. So a little bit more on inclusive hiring practices. Specifically about your job advertisement or your job postings is you want to keep things easy to read, use the sans serif fonts. Those are easier for screen readers and that kind of thing, those kinds of tools. You want to avoid gender coded words, and there's tools out there like Textio that will audit the language in a job posting, for example, and tell you, oh, there's like they found bias or they found gender coded words, and they'll give you suggestions on how to reword or choose a different word so that it's not so male coded or female coded, for example. Again, on your job advertisements, you want to emphasize your company's commitment to diversity and inclusion. And although you want to be specific with the skills required for the role, also be open to transferable skills, right? Someone may not have a specific degree that you're looking for because they didn't complete their education in Canada, or someone may not have all those years of experience that you're looking for, but they've been able to obtain the skills that you're looking for in less time. So really be open to transferable skills and look to hire for attitude, for value alignment, for potential, and not just try to find someone that's going to fit in, in a like a cookie cutter model. It's important to include salary ranges and, like I mentioned before, follow human rights and accessibility legislation for all of your hiring practices. So now just about the interviews themselves. We're just going to spend a little bit more time here before we get to the Q&A section of this evening's presentation. Interviewing best practices. Again, I'll just say you want to make sure that you're complying with employment legislation, including human rights and accessibility legislation. You want to determine the questions and the assessments that you're going to use in advance. So it's important that you have a process, and that process is used for each candidate. You want to focus on asking things and assessing the candidate's ability to perform the true requirements of the job. I always recommend including a variety of questions. We're going to talk about the different questions: behavioral, situational, case studies, etc. So you get an idea of what all of these types are. And then you can determine what's appropriate for the specific role that you're hiring for and for your business. You would want to incorporate questions relating to your core values, your company's core values. So like I said, for Link HR, two things are really important to me. One is transparency, that we're transparent with each other within our team, and we're completely transparent with our clients. And so I would always ask a question around transparency, around customer focus, around anticipating a client's needs. That's really important for me as well. So I would always ask questions like that in interviews for my own team. I always say assessing the HR skill and ability and experience is the easy part. It's assessing whether that individual's values align with my company's values. That's a little bit more challenging. When you come up with your interview questions, you also want to determine in advance what like the best answer would be, right? Be open to hearing other best answers, but you want to have an idea of what that best answer would be. And some people like to use a scoring mechanism. That's up to you, but you can do that or not do that. But you do want to follow the same interview process for each candidate. You want to be aware of your own bias. I could do, again, a whole other training session on our unconscious bias as it relates to the hiring process. If you're aware of your own bias, you're already a step ahead, and include a minimum of at least one other interviewer, if possible, to help with offsetting your own personal bias. Actually, just before I go into these different interview questions, can anyone share with me their favorite interview question of all time? I would love to hear from you. I usually ask this in my workshop, and I love to hear the answers. I actually get ideas for myself. So if anyone has anything they would like to share, their most favorite interview question. Oh, what is your favorite donut? Oh, I like that. And what's the purpose of that? Is that to make someone feel at ease? So you start with something like personal like that, but not, oh, the interview didn't tell me. Huh. I wonder. It might be just, starting the interview with a couple of questions like that, just to set the mood, put the candidate at ease. That's a great way to start an interview. Anyone else want to share? A question that you've been asked. Okay, how do you like being managed, supported? Yes. Very important. I always ask something like that. And I actually ask something like that after an employee has started. So I call it sort of like an onboarding interview or an entry interview. And I will ask the employee, how do you like to be managed? How do you like to receive feedback? Do you like it verbally? Do you like it in writing? How often do you want to meet with me? Those kinds of things. So it's important learning about someone. Tell me about a time when, okay, tell me about a time when, ... like something happened. I think that's what you're probably trying to get at. So I think this is like a behavioral type of interview question, and we're going to talk about those. What do you expect about the job? Yes, for sure. You want to see if their expectations are in alignment with what you are offering. Very good. Okay. So those are great. Thank you. So there's a number of different interview questions. I'm going to go through the major ones that I know of and we'll share with you today. So there's just informational interview questions, right? These are just questions to learn about the candidate's career goals, their interests, what motivates them, how do they like to be managed, how do they like to receive feedback, and that kind of thing. So some sample questions on the right there are, what are you looking for in your next opportunity, right? Why are you looking for a new role? And what are you looking for specifically in this next opportunity? Why did you decide to pursue work in this industry? What accomplishments are you most proud of? Those things tell you a lot about someone, and usually some of their values are going to come through in the answers to these questions, right? When someone is answering what they're looking for in their next opportunity, you're going to see what's really important to them, and take notes. Behavioral interview questions. Behavioral interview questions are designed to learn how a candidate would respond to a specific situation based on how they responded in the past. Okay, so these are the questions that start like, tell me about a time, or describe a time when, for example, you had to do something new for which you were not trained or had no experience, and how did you proceed? Right? And so these questions, you're looking for the job candidate to give you a very specific example. And sometimes your interviewee will not give you a specific example because it's hard to think about it specific examples, especially when you're nervous, right? So what you can do to help the interviewee is to probe and say, can you think of a specific example? It's okay, you can take your time. We're not in a rush. If you can tell me about a specific example when that happened. And so you can just probe for that specific situation. And what you're looking at here is not just how they responded, but also what they learned from that experience. So after they've told me how they responded to something in the past, I take it a step further and I say, well, what did you learn from that experience? Or what would you have done differently? Or would you not do anything differently? So I would just take it a step further. There's, of course, technical questions, and these are very important for some roles, especially. So, for example, this one, I don't even know if it makes sense, but explain two main built-in types of data in Python, or what is the difference among those different functions in Microsoft Excel, right? I like technical questions, but I also think technical assessments are more important. So if there is a role that requires technical skill, the best way to see if someone can perform those, or demonstrate those technical skills, is to give them an actual assessment. Now there's situational interview questions. These are slightly different from behavioral interview questions because these are providing scenarios and asking the interviewee how they would handle that situation. So not asking them for a specific example that happened in the past, but just, hypothetically, what would you do if you had to deal with a very angry customer that was confronting you, right? These are good. They're hypothetical. I like the behavioral-based interview questions a little bit more because I like to see what people have learned from their past experience. But there is also a time and a place for situational interview questions, especially when you're interviewing students and new graduates who maybe have not, they don't have much work experience. It would be hard for them to give you a specific situation for some behavioral-based interview questions. So if they don't have that experience to draw from, it may make more sense. It'll be easier for them to answer a situational interview question. Okay, then there's case study. Case studies. So again, these could be, these are very specific to the job and your company. It could be that you present someone with a scenario. Sometimes you have the interviewee arrive to the interview early and they can read through a case study and then and then they have to prepare to tell you how they would, tackle that specific situation or that specific case in the interview with you verbally or online or virtual. Or it could be providing them some data, for example, and they have to do like a little bit of a analysis and write out how they're analyzing and write out their notes. And so when you look at that, you're assessing, how did they tackle this problem? What was part of their analytical process in looking at this data, for example. So these are very good too for certain roles. Again, these questions, it all depends on the role and the company and what you're trying to assess. Most importantly, though, are probing questions. So it doesn't matter what other types of questions you're asking. To really get to know someone, you typically will need to ask follow-up questions or probing questions. So these are used to extract more information and obtain a more in-depth answer to one of your questions, right? Sometimes an interview may answer, a question and say, we did this and then we did that and then we did that and we accomplished the project on time. What I would want to ask at that point is, who's the we, right? I want to know, who did you work with? What was your role in the team? How much oversight were you getting from management? What was the end result? How did you go about doing X, Y, or Z? And what did you learn from the experience? So if you take anything from this workshop today in terms of interviewing questions, I hope that you take some of these examples and keep probing in your mind as the most important thing that you can do in an interview when you're interviewing someone. Because I think it didn't come up as a challenge. We talked about ghosting, but the other thing is that some people are very good at interviews and some are not. And that doesn't mean that they won't be your best employee. That person who maybe doesn't have much experience with interviews or just gets really nervous in the situation and doesn't perform well, doesn't mean that they won't be a star employee. So you can help them by probing. Similarly, someone who seems to answer things really well all the time, I usually take a step back as well, right? And think, wow, this person didn't get stumped at all. They are really good at being interviewed. They have a lot of experience with interviews, it seems like. I need to use probing questions to get them to tell me more specifically about them rather than telling me what I want to hear, right? And I think that's where a lot of times as interviews, we hear what we want to hear and then we stop there. We don't take it a step further, right? And sometimes we can be misled in those situations. So if you take anything from this today, think about probing questions when you're interviewing next. How are we doing for time? Oh boy, I don't have much time, do I? Okay, I'm just going to wrap up here, just quickly talk about onboarding. So this is, the next step. And as I mentioned earlier in the workshop this evening, you can hire the best person for the job if they do not have a positive, successful onboarding experience. You will likely lose them sooner rather than later. They probably won't stay a year. So, the candidate accepted. Now what do you do, right? You need to come up with an employee onboarding process it is not just orientation. It is not just a 1 hour, orientation session. It's a long-term process to integrate that new employee to your company and get them set up for success to perform the job that they were hired to do. And so when it's done correctly, it supports a successful start for the new employee. It leads more quickly to employee engagement. It will lead to employee retention, and it just helps the employee become more productive from the start, which is what's going to lead to job satisfaction and success. So some things that you can consider in an onboarding program are a welcome interview to get to know the employee. You want to set up meetings with the team and key stakeholders individually. You want to review company policies, practices, benefits, etc. You obviously want to make a training plan for them that probably covers several weeks of training, including compliance and safety, job-related training, technology training, etc. You want to review how they're going to be rewarded, how they're going to be evaluated on performance, etc. And most importantly, set up regular check-ins. Okay, so this is so important, not only for all employees, but new employees. You want to meet with them more frequently in the beginning. That is important. Check in, see how they're doing, see what you can do, to help support them in assimilating to your company. I've included some resources here. I didn't want to dive too deeply into compliance, but if you are an employer in Ontario, hiring employees in Ontario, this is some of the legislation that you'll want to look at. And if you'd like to contact me, I'm happy to hear from you. There's my email address. If you want to send me an email, if you'd like that onboarding guide, just send me an email at contact@linkhr.ca. I publish a blog. I have a new website now, which I'm happy to show off. So please visit my website. And then I've got a LinkedIn page. You can find my own personal LinkedIn account there and my company LinkedIn account. And I'll often post some HR tips and tricks on LinkedIn and on my blog. So thank you for that. I don't know if we have time for questions. I'll leave that to you.
Yeah, why don't we
yeah.
go to some questions? I think we still have some time. So folks, feel free to unmute your mic and jump in. I know we've been going through a bunch through the chat as well. Just gonna see. What differences would you want to see in an employment contract when hiring temporary versus co-op versus intern, contract, freelance, part-time, all the sorts? Are there any big differences that you say?
Yeah, I think I mentioned before, it is important to define the type of employment that you're offering in the contract. If it's a fixed term contract as opposed to an open-ended contract, a permanent role, obviously full-time and part-time, you want to be specific with the number of hours. And if there is a more rigid schedule, I would definitely include that in a contract as well. So it's very clear what's expected from the employee in terms of their working hours and that kind of thing.
Perfect. Ying just dropped in a question. So if it says any other tasks assigned by the manager in a job description, but the duties become more and more, so extra time needed for the work to complete, can employees refuse these duties that are not clearly stated in the job description?
So this is actually an important point. So a job description will never include every single task and activity an employee will do. So you will often see, and I tell my clients, put the last bullet point is other duties as assigned, right? So I think if you have that and they are reasonable, given the role, given the person's experience, given what they were hired to do, it's reasonable. Can they refuse? I mean, I think we're then looking into a fit issue. We're probably looking at there's a misalignment there with, I think, probably what the employee is expecting and what the employer is offering in terms of the employee experience. But yeah, the job description should have that bullet point that says other duties as assigned. Because as we all know, I mean, the other thing, and I talked about this before, small business hiring, small business teams will often need to, where like there could be a role, let's say it's marketing, for example, but in a small business, it's all about coming together, rolling up your sleeves and doing what needs to get done. And sometimes that means helping, I don't know, helping the business owner with something else for an afternoon, right? But that's, to me, that's an advantage of working in a small business, right? If I were a job seeker, I would see that as well. I'm getting more experience, I'm getting more exposure. So you want to highlight it that way in an interview process and describe that. That's the benefit the job seeker would get with working for your small company.
Maybe a bit of a reframing on that question as well. For maybe those really loyal employees that do go above and beyond when they come in and they say, hey, I've been putting a lot of time and effort into this, I would like a raise or something a bit more. How should our entrepreneur friends here approach that conversation?
Yeah, I think that I think that employers do need to be very mindful of that as your business grows and the roles change and your employees are growing with your business oftentimes, right? Which is a wonderful thing to do. Making sure that you are checking in and reevaluating things on a regular basis. I'm not saying every week or every month, but definitely recognize, I think it's so important to recognize an employee's contributions and growth to your company, and to retain them, obviously looking at what is valuable to them that I can provide. Often if the job has changed, we usually say in HR, like more than 30%, we need to look at redoing the job description and looking at the compensation for that again. But you also want to reward and recognize your employees for going that extra mile on a specific project, right? And that's where I go back to what I talked about in the HR strategy, was how are you going to reward and recognize performance? Is it through a bonus? Or is it through a special time off entitlement? Is it through an award program? Those kinds of things. So you want to make sure that you're definitely recognizing and rewarding. Otherwise, you will lose the employee, of course. Yeah.
Awesome answer. Any other questions, folks? Just monitoring the chat. I don't see any new ones. Do feel free to drop them in, or unmute yourself. How do you let go of an employee?
We'll do another session on that one. Obviously, there's a lot of things to consider when you're letting go of an employee. So I think the first, the main piece of advice I would say is think about how would you want to be let go, right? How would you want to be informed that your employment has ended? And take that human, people-centered approach to doing a dismissal or termination. Of course, there's all sorts of legal considerations that you need to look at, and things that you need to be compliant with in terms of termination pay or severance pay, vacation payouts, notice given to the employee, all of that kind of thing. But there's also security things. How do you get your assets back? How do you try to stop that departing employee from going to take one of your clients? That's where that employment agreement with all those non-solicit, non-disclosure, intellectual property clauses are included. That's going to help protect you if a termination doesn't go as planned. But I find that when you communicate with empathy, and you've been providing, it depends on the reason for letting go of the employee. If it's due to shortage of work, just being transparent about the fact that there's shortage of work. If there's issues with the performance, it should never come as a surprise, right? Even a performance review with a rating of poor performance should never come as a surprise to an employee. You should, as their manager, their leader, be providing regular feedback. So if it is a termination due to a few months of trying to work with the employee, it's just not working out, they shouldn't be surprised, really. It's still going to be hard news to hear. And that's where, approaching it with a lot of empathy and considering what you can do to help the employee transition and move on, that's very important as well. Again, it goes back to thinking also about your reputation as an employer, right? Those departing employees could still be some of your greatest brand ambassadors, or if they have not had a good experience, they could also be online and writing negative reviews, right? This is the world we live in. So I think, for me, again, I always go back to transparency. I think being honest and having difficult conversations with a huge dose of empathy always works.
Love that feedback. And maybe one more, just final question before we wrap up today. So what are your thoughts on exit interviews?
I'm a fan of exit interviews. I do like exit interviews. Of course, not when you're terminating someone and it's not a good situation. You wouldn't want to do an exit interview in that case. But if it's sort of a good performer and they've resigned, yes, I would definitely do an exit interview. But more important these days is to do stay interviews. So I don't know if anyone in this group has heard about stay interviews. It's like an exit interview, but you're doing it while the employee is still employed with you, right? So you're sort of taking a more proactive approach. Exit interviews are great, but now that employee is gone, so you can't save that employee from leaving. But a stay interview where you sometimes 5 questions asking them, do they see themselves working at your company in a year from now? Would they recommend your company to others as a good employer? And what do they enjoy the most? And what do they enjoy the least? Right? And then you're getting some really valuable feedback and can make adjustments here and there to retain your staff. So I think stay interviews are more important than exit interviews, but I recommend both.
I love that. And I think that probably answers Fred's question as well in terms of how you retain employees. But any other thoughts or tips on retention?
I think just keeping conversation, the lines of conversation open with your team, and providing that space, that safe space for them to give you feedback. I think if you can show as a leader, demonstrate as a leader that you are also learning and growing, and you are, your priority is providing a positive workplace experience, a positive employee experience for them, and being open to hearing their feedback and suggestions and getting them involved, that's going to go a long way in retaining your employees. So I think just that connection with the connection between leadership and team, so important.
Beautiful. And I think with that, I do want to be respectful of your time, Adriana, and everyone else's as well. I think with that, we will start wrapping up today's session. Don't leave just yet. I do ask all of you to please share your feedback from today's session. Every piece of it gets counted, and it does help us plan for future sessions. Wanted to give a huge thank you to you, Adriana, for such an amazing session. It was so informative and insightful. I've seen so many comments come up here as well that appreciated your thoughts. So really, really, really thank you for your time today on behalf of Whitespace and the Markham Small Business Center, as well as our entrepreneur friends joining here from the community. So huge shout out to you for that. Folks, please do make sure that we do have one more final session of this cohort program coming up next week. So please do make sure that you are signed up for the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion in the Workplace program coming up next week. It's a pretty good segment from today's session as well, from an HR best practices. So please do make sure you're signed up to that. With that being said, Anthony, thank you for your support today. Adriana, thank you again as always. Really appreciate your engagement with the community. And thanks to the rest of you for being amazing participants in our session today. So we will wrap up. We'll send out post-event deck and the recording as always. Aside from that, have a wonderful evening to all of you. Thank you again and take care.